The emotional and political stakes in Outlander Season 8, Episode 5 continue to rise, but one of the most fascinating and quietly explosive storylines belongs to William Ransom. While much of the episode is centered around war, survival, and the looming dangers of the American Revolutionary War, William's arc takes a deeply personal turn, one that could change everything he thought he knew about his family, his loyalties, and his place in this conflict. Because in this episode, William discovers something shocking. His cousin is alive. And not only alive, but fighting with the Continental Army. At first, this revelation might seem like just another twist in a story filled with shifting allegiances. But when you really look at what it means for William, it becomes clear that this is much bigger than that. This is a moment that challenges his identity at its core. To understand why this matters so much, we have to look at where William is coming from. William has been raised within the British world. His values, his sense of honor, his understanding of duty are all tied to that identity. He believes in structure, in loyalty, in the idea that his role in the war is clear. He knows who he is, and more importantly, he knows where he stands. Or at least he thought he did. Because Episode 5 begins to dismantle that certainty piece by piece. The discovery that his cousin is alive and aligned with the opposing side creates an immediate internal conflict. It's not just about politics anymore. It's about family. And in a story like Outlander, family has always been the most powerful force of all. This moment forces William to confront something he's been able to avoid up until now, the idea that the war isn't as simple as he wants it to be. There's no clean divide between right and wrong. There's no clear lines separating loyalty from betrayal. Because when someone you share blood with is fighting on the other side, those lines blur. And that's exactly what happens here. The episode does a brilliant job of showing William's reaction in layers. At first, there's disbelief. A kind of quiet shock that he doesn't fully know how to process. Then comes the questioning. How is this possible? Why would his cousin choose that path? What does it say about everything he's been taught? And underneath all of that, there's something deeper. Doubt. For the first time, William is forced to question not just his cousin's choices, but his own. If someone so closely connected to him can see the world so differently, then what does that mean for his understanding of the war? Is he truly on the right side? Or is that something he's simply been told to believe? This is where the episode really shines because it doesn't give us easy answers. Instead, it allows that tension to exist. It lets William sit with those questions, wrestle with them, and slowly begin to realize that his world is more complicated than he thought. And that realization is dangerous. Not in a physical sense, at least not yet, but in a psychological one. Because once you start questioning your beliefs, it becomes harder to hold on to them with the same certainty. And for someone like William, whose identity is built on that certainty, that's a major shift. At the same time, the revelation about his cousin being with the Continental Army ties directly into the larger narrative of the war. The show has always emphasized that this conflict isn't just about armies, it's about people. Families divided, loyalties tested, and individuals forced to make impossible choices. William's situation is a perfect example of that. He's not just witnessing the war, he's experiencing its personal consequences. And that's what makes his storyline so compelling. Because it's not just about what he discovers, it's about what he does with that discovery. Does he confront his cousin? Does he report what he knows? Does he try to understand? Or does he ignore it, choosing to hold on to the version of reality that feels safer? The episode doesn't resolve these questions immediately, and that's intentional. This isn't a storyline that can be wrapped up quickly. It's something that will continue to evolve, to influence William's decisions, and to shape his character moving forward. There's also a deeper layer to all of this when you consider William's connection to Jamie Fraser, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet. The idea that his bloodline is tied to both sides of the conflict adds another level of complexity to his situation. It's almost as if his identity itself is divided. Part of him belongs to the British world he's been raised in. But another part, whether he knows it or not, is connected to the very people he's been taught to oppose. And Episode 5 subtly builds on that tension. The cousin's presence within the Continental Army isn't just a random twist, it's a reflection of William's own internal conflict, a mirror of the divided loyalties that define his character. As the episode progresses, you can see how this discovery begins to influence the way William views everything around him. Conversations take on new meaning. Actions are interpreted differently. The world becomes less certain, less predictable. And that uncertainty is what drives his character forward. Because once you start seeing things differently, you can't go back. The episode also uses this storyline to explore one of its central themes, the idea that identity isn't fixed. It's shaped by experiences, by relationships, by the choices we make. For William, this moment is a catalyst. It forces him to reconsider who he is, not just as a soldier, but as a person. And that's where the emotional weight of the story really comes through. Because beneath the political and historical context, this is a deeply personal journey. It's about a young man realizing that the world is more complicated than he thought, that the people he cares about may not fit into the categories he's been given, and that understanding those complexities requires courage. The ending of this storyline in episode 5 doesn't provide closure, but it does provide direction. It makes it clear that William is at a crossroads, that the choices he makes moving forward will define not just his role in the war, but his sense of self. And that's what makes this revelation so important. It's not just a plot twist. It's a turning point, one that will have lasting consequences for his character and for the story as a whole. As we look ahead to the rest of Season 8, it's clear that William's journey is only just beginning. The war will continue to test him, to challenge his beliefs, and to push him into situations where he has to make difficult decisions. And now, with the knowledge that his own family is divided across enemy lines, those decisions are going to become even more complicated. Because it's one thing to fight for a cause. It's another to fight against your own blood. And that's the reality William is now facing. A reality that will force him to question everything he thought he knew. And ultimately, to decide what kind of man he wants to be. Throughout Outlander Season 8, William has been investigating the death of his cousin, Benjamin Gray. Ben, a redcoat, supposedly died from illness while being held captive by the rebels. William's suspicions are ultimately confirmed when he sees Ben at the Continental camp. Denzel calls him General Bleecker, and he wears the blue uniform of the rebels. At first, William is thrilled to see Ben alive. However, he quickly pieces it together and becomes enraged. Ben faked his death, left his wife and son, and has taken on a false identity with the opposing side. He's a turncoat, and that's unlikely to sit well with William. Of course, the fact that he only just had a rather steamy moment with Ben's widow isn't likely to help the situation. However, when William came looking, he found that another man was buried in Ben's grave. This led William to believe that his cousin was still alive. However, without any more evidence, he gave up the search.
Warning!
Spoilers for Outlander Season 8, Episode 5 ahead. The excitement really kicks up with Outlander Season 8, Episode 5, Send for the Devil. In this installment of the Romantasy series, we see Jamie and Captain Charles Cunningham officially come to odds, and it's essentially an all-out battle on Fraser's Ridge. That's not all, of course, as Roger gets caught up in the siege of Savannah, all while Brianna waits anxiously at Lord John's house. What's more, we get some development in William's investigation into his cousin Ben's death. Add in the arrival of Benjamin Cleveland to Fraser's Ridge, and there's a whole lot to dive into. Previously in Outlander Season 8, Jamie discovered that Captain Cunningham was raising a loyalist militia on Fraser's Ridge. The supposedly retired redcoat invited Jamie to join him, but Jamie instead heads out to recruit men around the county for his own militia. At that point, he was reluctant to accept the help of the bloodthirsty Benjamin Cleveland. However, going into Outlander Season 8, Episode 5, Jamie gets news of Cunningham's plans, and he can no longer resist the assistance of the devil. Captain Cunningham mounts an attack on Jamie at Lodge Night. At the start of Outlander Season 8, Episode 5, Mr. Whitaker, the father of the twin babies Claire delivered, shows up at Fraser's Ridge with a warning for Jamie. He had been hunting with the Cherokee when they were approached by white men attempting to recruit them for Ferguson's loyalist militia. The men stated that, very soon, Cunningham would be in charge of Fraser's Ridge, not Jamie. Whitaker understood this to mean that an attack on Jamie is imminent. Of course, he is right. Jamie surmises that Cunningham will attack just after their lodge meeting. He gathers up as many men as possible, and while the men finish up their prayer in the church, Jamie escapes into the woods. There, he and his men lure in and mark down the names of the tenants who took Cunningham's side. The intention isn't to harm any of them, but they're sure to be evicted in the coming episodes of Outlander.